to encourage to get involved this evening. So please do put your questions and your comments in the chat. If you have any questions that you'd like to either ask Hannah or myself, please do put Q&A along with the question, and we'll read them out at the end. If you'd prefer to ask the question yourself, please also make mention of that, and you can come on and ask the question. This is meant to be a safe space where we're encouraging openness and advocating for mental well-being, so please do get involved. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our special guest, Hannah Beko, this evening. Some of you will know Hannah already. She's a commercial property solicitor with Gunnar Cook, and also a lawyer's coach and an advocate for changing the culture in the legal profession to promote mental well-being. I met Hannah last year when I was furloughed. It was at a junior lawyers event, and then from there I got to know the coffee and coaching sessions, which are still running on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm sure Hannah will tell you more. It's designed for everyone from junior lawyer to managing partner, and it really is a lovely group. I found it so supportive, and it really got me through my furlough and beyond as well. So without further ado, please join me in giving Hannah a very warm welcome. So just to start off with, Hannah, if you could give us some background on your mental health journey and how you became a coach interested in well-being.
Oh, great question, and a really good place to start, actually. So mental health journey. Do you know what? I was thinking about this, actually, and it really, I guess, starts when I was at university, because that's when I had my first panic attack. And I was working at the it wasn't the Students' Advice Centre, but it was something like that. It was to do with housing, and I was at work that day, and I remember just feeling really not very well, and all starting to, you know, my chest was sore and my heart hurt and all sorts of things. And if anybody's ever experienced it, you know, the sort of thing. And I was really worried. I just thought, oh my goodness, I do feel like I'm having a heart attack or something. So as soon as I finished work, I went to the hospital. And that's when they did all the tests and all the sorts of things. And they said, you've had a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And I was really surprised, because I'd never sort of had any issues like that before. We joke growing up as a family. I'm from a farming background, so they're all very stoic, very stiff upper lip. And when my mum actually became a counsellor, we all took the mick out of her for years, because we were like, well, you just grin and bear it, don't you? You just get your head down and get on with it. And so that was really my first, so early 20s, when I suddenly realised, actually, we're not all made of stone, and you know, things get to us. So I got through that sort of period, and then I started having panic attacks again about 6 years ago. So I was under what I now know, looking back, was chronic stress. I ticked all the boxes for chronic stress. And the panic attacks, I suppose, were the last straw when I knew I had to do something. I had an older boy and a 2-year-old at the time, and I remember my 2-year-old was asleep upstairs, and I just thought, I can't be having panic attacks and, you know, be this unwell when I'm trying to A, run a business, and B, look after children. So that was how I got interested in the whole mental health, how to deal with stress, how to manage it, because I knew at that stage I could either go and ask for antidepressants, or I had to find something. So it was that journey really for me. It was just for me personally, and along the way I discovered how bad the legal profession was for stress. I didn't know before. I mean, I knew the stress I was under, but I hadn't really talked to anybody else about it. But that's when I did all the research and found all the statistics and just how awful it was, and I just thought, someone has to do something about this. And apparently that was me. So yeah, that's how it all started and how I got into coaching and training now.
Okay, well, that was really insightful. Obviously, I've heard a bit of it before, but I'm sure everyone will appreciate you sharing that story. I mean, you've touched on a bit about being a student, but not necessarily so much about being a junior lawyer and what your mental health was like in that time. So if you can just tell us a bit about that.
Yes, I can. I mean, I have to say, though, it was very different when I was a junior lawyer. So we're talking, what, 16, 17, 18 years ago now. And I absolutely loved it. You know, thinking back to being a trainee, I didn't love my first year of qualification, but that's why I left the firm at the time. My boss was awful. So I suppose there would have been some stress there looking back, actually. He did send me to court once, and then I got back and on my desk were 2 trial bundles that he'd had for 2 weeks, and he'd sent me to court without them. So, you know, that was pretty much the final straw, and I left. But other than that for a short time, I loved my years as a junior solicitor, and I wouldn't say that it was necessarily particularly stressful, but I've thought a lot about this given, you know, the research that you've all done, the junior lawyers division, and you know, my clients and people I support now, and it's a very different thing. When I was a junior solicitor and a trainee, emails had just come in. Like, we'd get 2 or 3 emails a day and thought, wow, look, we've got an email. If only we'd known, we wouldn't have been so excited. But everything was still driven by post, and you didn't have Blackberries, you didn't have phones, so you only had what was in the office. And then as soon as you left, there was nothing else to think about. So it is a very different time now, and I know the pressures are completely different.
Yes, to provide some comparison, I went away recently for a week and a half, came back to 700 odd emails. So I guess that's the difference with the current time. It's just so instant, and people expect a response quickly. I mean, just to give a bit of background on myself to anyone who doesn't know, I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression in November 2019. So my mental health journey, should I say, is very much intertwined with my legal career, because I was 3 months into my training contract at the time. So I've really had to deal with it all in the same time, and a pandemic as well. So not very good. But yeah, and obviously now you're a consultant with Gunnar Cook. Can you tell us a bit about how becoming a consultant has changed your well-being, and what your advice is to any junior lawyers thinking of becoming a consultant?
Well, I suppose if I'm really honest, when I went through the chronic stress and panic attacks and everything, I was a consultant solicitor. You know, I support a lot of employed lawyers, but actually I have to say I nearly burnt out as a self-employed lawyer. So it's not that one is easier than the other. I mean, in some respects, when you're self-employed, yes, you've got all the pressures of clients and work and worried about making a mistake, but also it's your income. So, you know, when I was in you know, chronic stress, it was, oh my goodness, have I made a mistake? Have I done something wrong? I'm going to lose the client. I'm going to lose my business. I'm going to lose my house, you know, and that was the chronic stress reaction I was in. So in some respects, it can be more stressful because, you know, it is your business and it is your income, as well as all the hang-ups we have as lawyers about not getting it wrong, not making a mistake. Am I good enough? Perfectionism, all the things we have swirling around. You know, it can be exacerbated by being self-employed. But on the other side, and why I am a huge fan of it, and I always support anyone who wants to find out more or know how it works to really consider it, is that what I didn't do was take control of it until that time when I decided that either I took control of it or I had to quit and leave my business behind. And I took control of it and literally turned it around in 6 to 8 months. You know, I got better working hours. I said no to things. I got help instead of trying to do everything myself. I put my prices up, so I was still making the same money and working less hours. You know, so the good thing about being self-employed is you are in control. You know, I could go on retreats to learn how to meditate. I could go and get myself a coach and a mentor through the business because it was my business. So there is much more flexibility and freedom, but you have to be careful and look out for the warning signs and put those things in place.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. So going back to your role as a lawyer's coach, what has been your most rewarding experience?
Do you know, this is so hard because so much of it is just amazing. I mean, I have to say one of my highlights really, and of the pandemic, is the work we've done with coffee and coaching and things like that. You know, bringing groups of people together. I'm a huge fan of peer coaching, is in effect what it is. You're supporting each other. The fact I'm there, I just put it together. But you know, seeing lawyers in particular, because historically lawyers have been very competitive. It's been very, you know, you would never admit to another lawyer that you were struggling, you know, or that you wanted help or ask for help. You know, heaven forbid somebody you didn't know well from another firm, you know, you would never do that. And yet to see people come together and support each other and speak honestly and openly together, you know, and you know, people say that that's a bit of a gift I have of just creating that space for people where they feel safe and to do that. And so that is hugely rewarding because it's people helping themselves and helping each other. And I hope changing, as you said, changing the culture of law slowly, that actually we're not competitive, we're not trying to stab each other in the back, we can support each other. So that's been really rewarding. But with any clients, it's always just seeing that moment, because what I always want clients to see is that they are in control, because they often believe that everything is out of their control. It's my firm's fault, or it's the client's fault, or, you know, all these things. It's like one client at the moment, she came to me because of work-life balance. You know, my firm isn't giving me work-life balance, etc. And we looked at it, and it's not her firm. They're actually really supportive and they don't work long hours. She's not giving herself work-life balance. And it's that moment when they realize that they can take control and they can change everything.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that sort of ties into what I wanted to come on to about people's thoughts and emotions. So obviously that's something that you must come across a lot, how people's thoughts and emotions work. I mean, the main thing that I've heard a lot is lawyers are type A personalities. So we're perfectionists. We love to run ourselves into the ground to make everything perfect. What have you learned about people's thoughts and emotions and how they impact their well-being?
Well, I think you're absolutely right about lawyers and character traits. I think it's fascinating, and I'll either do some research myself or keep looking out for some. But I think the sort of traits we see with lawyers are the perfectionist. You see a lot of imposter syndrome, all those sorts of things, people pleasers, which, you know, are great for firms. They probably interview for those traits and go, oh my goodness, this person's brilliant. They're never going to say no. They're never going to stop because they want everything to be perfect. But obviously extremely bad for well-being. So I think that the work I do with people around thoughts and feelings is, again, it's all about control, and it's understanding that, you know, we let our thoughts run away with us and we let them control us. And what happens is we have a thought and then we give it a meaning, we decide what that means, and then that affects how we feel and it affects what we do. So, you know, in an example I often give, I'd receive an email or a phone call that said, Hannah, get in touch with me quickly. And I would make that mean I'd made a mistake, I'd done something wrong. Immediately then I would feel panicky, you know, blood's rushing around and hairs on the back of your neck and can't think straight. And then the action was more panic and no action. It was procrastination. It was freezing. Whereas actually now I get the same, Hannah, get in touch with me quickly. And I just look at the time and go, well, can I ring them now? Or actually, no, I'll have to ring them later because I'm busy now. That's literally all that happens. But you see, I was always in control of that. And it's once you realize that you are in control of your thoughts and catch them. So before the big emotional impact comes, whether it's stress, anxiety, upset, anger, resentment, whatever it is, before that big emotion takes you over, what is that thought? You know, look at it. Is it true? Is there any evidence for that thought? Or actually, do I need to either ask some questions or wait and see or look into it or whatever it is before I go down that rabbit hole of the stress and anxiety? So in that sense, we are in control of our thoughts. We just need to learn to start catching them. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. We just got to start looking for it, get interested. But, you know, the brain is fascinating and we can rewire it. At the moment, it's wired for panic, for many of us. We panic, but we can rewire it to say, no, actually, there's no reason to panic yet, you know, and even if there was, we will deal with it.
Yes, yes.
You know?
That's actually really interesting what you say there, because that's exactly how I was, a sort of frantic, oh, I've done something wrong. And I've actually been learning recently about taking control of my emotions and very much about positive thinking as well. So I do a lot of, when something bad happens, look for the gift in the situation, even though it's not obvious at the time, but there always is one. Or one thing that I used to do a lot is, I'll be happy when, say, I got my training contract or when I finish my training contract. So I'm trying to stop all of that. And do you find that positive thinking is quite important to well-being as well?
It is. I think it's one of the most important things. And you know, again, it's one of those things I've sort of become known for, is about being all positive, but that it's not that toxic positivity, you know, that we saw a lot of in pandemic, where we'll pretend everything's okay. I'm not about that at all. It's, you know, if you need to talk things out and things are not okay, then that's perfectly okay too. But it's like, as you say, Sonay, with every situation, we can decide to look for the positives or the lessons. So even when I was having my panic attacks and nearly burnt out and, you know, the worst experience I've ever had in my life, I remember repeating to myself a lot, I will look back on this and be grateful. And I kept repeating that, I will look back on this and be grateful. And now, I mean, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't do all the things I do, meet all the wonderful people I do, if that hadn't happened. But yeah, we do get, as you say, we do get to be in control, but finding the positive, and a great practice, if anybody doesn't do it, you know, people talk about gratitude, it's that simple. Just be grateful for 3 things every night, but it improves that muscle that looks for the positive and looks for things to be grateful for, even in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just actually moved on quite nicely to my next question. So what are your main strategies for looking after your well-being?
Well, there you go. I'll start with gratitude then, because I've mentioned it, it's out the bag. I have 3 that were my go-tos when I was in the situation I was in, and that I always train people on first. There's plenty more, but these are the starting 3. So gratitude is one. It's the easiest. Just think of 3 things before bed that you're grateful for. You can just think them to yourself. You can say them out loud. You can write them down, whatever you want. But just thinking of 3 things, and don't go for the big things, you know, not the roof over your head, not the family, not the job. Go for the little things from that day. So, you know, taking part in this event today, or seeing a friend for lunch, or whatever it is, you know, finishing a deal or getting a new client, you know, something personal from that day. That's a really powerful exercise. My other go-to is meditation. I love the science behind all of these. Gratitude, the science that it improves the state of your heart. It also helps you sleep better, which helps with stress. But meditation, again, the science around it is just amazing. So what the stress reaction does to our body, meditation can reverse it. So that's how powerful it is. There's lots of studies saying that meditation can be as effective as antidepressants in many cases as well. And I totally believe that. Also helps with things like more confidence, better sleep, all sorts of thinking more rationally, thinking more clearly. Meditation is definitely a go-to. And then the final one that I always give people is journaling. So just writing things out, and I call it a mind dump. So everything that's going on in your head, literally just dump it out on paper. So it's not about thinking or trying to be straight, you know, very difficult for lawyers in the beginning, but it's literally whatever's going on in here goes down on the paper, with no spell check, no grammar, nothing. Just if it's oh, my hand is hurting, oh, it's cold in here, I don't know why Hannah told me to do this, whatever it is, just straight onto the paper, and you just dump it all out, and that really does help reduce stress levels as well.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think you know mine already, because I found them as a result of your coffee and coaching sessions. The book by Howard Elrod's, The Miracle Morning, which I recommend to everyone. So that, without spoiling it, I don't know if you've got a copy.
Oh, I had it there, but it must be on a different bookshelf. Yeah.
But it entails doing 6 things every morning. So it's meditation, exercise, reading, journaling. What's the other ones?
Well, yes, I mean, Miracle Morning is hardcore. He recommends getting up at 5, and as Sonay says, doing about 6 things, which could be exercise, meditation, journaling, reading a couple of pages of a good book, you know, all these things. I do a halfway house. I get up at 6 and I do about 3 things. So 6 till 6:30. But yeah, it is honestly, the book is amazing, isn't it? Even the testimonials at the front, fantastic. Yeah.
Well, like you, I've had a bit of a stop-start approach. Obviously, it was over a year ago I discovered it. So now I've only got 3 things that I do. So it's the yoga, the reading, and the journaling. I've stuck with them, and I couldn't really advocate for that more. That really helps for mental well-being. So moving on a bit for some more general advice, or as we say, more specific for the current time. I know something that I would like advice on is post-lockdown anxiety. So going back to seeing people in person, going to the office, in-person events. Have you experienced this, or are you really excited to go back to in-person events?
I'm loving going back to in-person events, I have to say. I think before you go out to anything for the first time, it's quite nerve-wracking. I think I was eased into it because I wanted the children to do a lot of things in the summer as soon as they could. So I had been out and about, taking them places and seeing people and things like that. So yes, as soon as I could be at the organisation that I trained as a coach with, they had their first in-person event last weekend. And I always said, as soon as they're having an in-person event, I'm going to crew because I want to help and be there. And it was absolutely amazing. There was a lot of COVID safety things, like we all did a test before we went and all that sort of thing, wore visors and masks until people were comfortable with it. So there was a lot of safety precautions being taken. But I know there are a lot of people who are really, really nervous about venturing out there again. I'm speaking to a lot of firms who've got completely mixed teams. They've got some people who can't wait to be back in the office and others who don't want to come in at all. And, you know, how do they manage that?
Yeah. I'm definitely in the bracket of not wanting to go out, although I have been this week for my trial, and that was a surreal experience, having to look at someone's face for the full day, which you haven't done in ages.
Yes.
I mean, what would your advice be for anyone who is scared to go back to in-person events, but obviously might need to for certain things like trials and going into the office?
Yeah, I think if you can, small baby steps is always good. You know, going to places that you feel more comfortable with, going to places where you've checked what their COVID procedures are. You know, are they, for example, recommending people do lateral flow tests before they go? You know, you can always keep your mask on. That's always somebody's choice to keep their own mask on and to keep their distance. You know, again, if you're going, I'm putting on an event in November, but I'm going to run it at half capacity, so everybody who is seated will be seated in a bigger distance than they would have been. And again, I'm not going to insist people do tests, but I'm going to recommend that we all do tests before we go. So it's finding events that you can go to where you feel comfortable and just edging in slowly. Interestingly, I was speaking to someone today who said what he's doing with his team, if he's got people who are very, very cautious, you know, almost to the point of they won't go in, what they've doing is almost a phased return, as you would with somebody who perhaps has been off with mental health or stress. So they're coming in for something like a few hours in the morning, a few days a week, something like that, and coming in off peak times when there's not a lot of people around. So I think it's, baby steps, things that you feel, even if it's outside your comfort zone, how can it feel safe for you to make those first steps? But I think for the majority of people, once they do get back out there, I think they will feel better. I think it's just those first few steps.
No, I completely agree. Another question I've had from a lot of junior lawyers is, should you tell a prospective or current employer about your mental health struggles, and what would your advice be?
This is a really difficult one. I think it depends on the person and how you feel about it. You certainly shouldn't have to, and I don't think anyone should feel that they have to. I always think it's good to start a relationship with a new employer with as much honesty as you can. You know, we've had the same question for years, for example, for women who are pregnant, perhaps, or you know, maybe having IVF treatment when they go for a job interview. You know, we've had these sorts of questions for a long time. And actually, my advice always then was speak to your recruiter. If you've got a good recruitment agent that is helping you within that process, you know, you can often, if they're good, speak to them and see how to approach it. But I think it is a tricky one with mental health. I mean, my own personal opinion is, as I say, that you really shouldn't have to tell anyone, because even if you have never had any issues before and you start a new job, unfortunately, statistically in this career, everyone's going to have an issue at some point in their career. So does it really make any difference to say anything up front? You know, and it could be that you were diagnosed years ago, but actually haven't had any treatment or had any issues for a long time. So I think it obviously depends on the situation and how the person feels. If there's somebody who feels that they would feel better to talk about it and to be honest with them, then that's what they should do. But I don't think they should feel they have to.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. Certainly don't feel that you have to, but maybe it is a way of seeing if that prospective employer cares about well-being. So if you feel it's important to mention it, I'd say don't be scared of mentioning it. Don't think it's going to stop you from getting a job, because if you're not going to get the job, then they weren't the firm for you. Is always what I've said. I hope you agree with that suggestion.
Yeah. Oh, I do, absolutely. And my personal view, whenever I speak to lawyers, or in fact anybody who's had any issues that they might have had treatment for, or had to find their own ways of dealing with, however they've done it, that's not a bad thing. I think that's actually a very positive thing, because the people who've had to face these issues and find ways to move forward, like you have, Sonay, it makes you stronger. It makes you able to cope with this career in a way that if people have never faced it and haven't got any coping mechanisms, it will hit them at some point. And you know, that's the way. And I think it's always better that people know what their triggers are and when they're going to need either to up their coping mechanisms or reach out for help. And actually, I see that as a strength.
No, I completely agree. Definitely. So I guess that also brings me on to my next question, which is obviously through your experience in trying to change the profession for the better, what changes would you say are needed in the workplace to support mental well-being?
Well, it's a great question. I think for the legal profession as a whole, we need two things. It is 50% workplace and employers, but it is 50% lawyers themselves as well. So I think, you know, and it's wonderful you've got people here listening tonight because they obviously, you know, value mental health and learning more about it. And that's what we need. We need it to not be taboo. We need to not be afraid of talking about it, because everybody has mental health, everyone has physical health, everyone has mental health. And the more positive we are, it's not a bad thing. As we were just saying, you know, if at any point in your life you realize I need a little bit of help or support with this, whatever that is, that's a good thing. And I think we need to empower lawyers to not see it as a failure and a problem, and actually it's a good thing. So that's the sort of lawyer mentality that I try to work towards helping. But for firms, it's I mean, I feel bad saying anything about them because they've come such a long way, even in the 5 or 6 years I've been doing this. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, you could not talk to firms about stress. They would either say, we don't have a problem, or yes, we do, but so does everyone. It's just part and parcel of the job, suck it up and get on with it. You know, 5 or 6 years ago, that's what they were saying. Now, they have come quite a long way since then. And as you'll hear a lot, mental health is on the agenda. Cynical me says, though, yeah, it's on the agenda, but it's right at the bottom. They usually run out of time to talk about it in their meetings, and they tend to just throw something at it to tick a box. And that is harsh. And I know there are some firms that are doing great things, but unfortunately still, I think the majority, and mainly actually not out of any fault of their own, but because they genuinely don't know what to do, they will book in some webinars or some trainings or whatever, or they will, as one of my favorite firms has done, spent £2.5 million on a resources webinar website for their staff to go onto. And every single member of staff I ask at that firm if they've even been on it, nobody's been on it, nobody's used it, nobody's looked at it. But, you know, it ticks a great big box that they've invested in mental health and well-being. So what I believe they do need is to actually ask people what would help and what do they want, and B, get something that's really effective and get management to buy into it, because it's all well and good. And as I'm sure, you know, your junior lawyer audience will probably attest to this. It's all well and good having the webinars, the lunch times, the let's talk about sleep, let's talk about meditation. But if the senior fee earners don't go, then the junior ones don't feel that they can. If your boss is sitting there working through lunch and you're supposed to be going to a meditation seminar, it's not so easy for the juniors to do it. So it's role modeling, it's persuading those at the top that this is important.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the issue I've had. My supervisor, although she's brilliant, you've met her, she is very hardworking, and she will work through lunch and work all the hours. And so that has rubbed off on me. As much as I care about my own well-being, you can't help, especially in this profession, you're like, oh, I'll just work till 8 p.m. And especially working from home, it's become all the more possible. But what I've actually seen, which I thought was quite interesting, I've forgotten the name of the firm, so if you know, if anyone on the call knows, do remind me, but they've, on their client care letter, they actually put that they care about employee well-being, so their employees will take lunch breaks, they're encouraged to not work late and take their annual leave, and that's to manage client expectations. And I think that doesn't cost the firm anything, but it's brilliant because clients don't care. Clients will call you at midnight and say, hey, answer my email. So if you've got that in the client care letter, it's a way of the management saying, look, this is how our employees work. So don't expect 24/7 service. And I just think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think it is. And I don't know the firm, actually. If you remember or anybody does, let me know, because that's a brilliant initiative. Because I think it's not even just the words that they've put down, but it's the fact that they clearly value it enough to put it to their clients. Because often, again, cynical me is saying, law firms will do an amount for well-being, but not if it's going to impact their bottom line. And that's where it's got to change. It's got to be well-being first. And ironically, that will make them more profitable, but it's got to be well-being first, and it's got to be managing client expectations. You know, that's what, it's a firm I'm working with. He brought me in to do well-being for his people. And I said, what you really need to do, we need to sit down and talk about your clients' expectations, because you cannot have people answering the phone all the time. Because while they're doing that, their work is piling up. Then they're working in the evening. That's not looking after well-being. It's the clients we have to start with.
Yes.
We have to explain to them that it's not a good use of a lawyer's time to be on the phone all the time. It's better for them to actually be doing the work.
Yes.
Instead of being on the phone. So it's those practical things which, as you say, that firm, if they've put it in their engagement letter, then it sounds like they're serious about it, that clients, we will tell you that our people take breaks.
Yeah, definitely. So now we've actually made it to the final question before we move on to our Q&A. And that's just, what would your advice be to someone starting out in the legal profession with regard to looking after their well-being?
Oh, if I said don't do it, that would be awful, wouldn't it? No, a few years ago, I probably would have said don't do it. But there has been, as I say, I'm being mean, there's been a lot of steps forward in terms of well-being. And the wonderful thing is that, you know, many junior lawyers now and aspiring lawyers are talking about this. So I really don't think it's going to be the same, even in 5 or 10 years' time, as more and more people make it into management who know how important these issues are, you know, because either they've been through it themselves or they just genuinely buy into how important it is. So things are definitely changing. But, you know, and what I love is that so many junior and law students even come and learn about these things and come and learn about the coping strategies and the warning signs to look out for. And that's something that, you know, I was 35, I didn't know. And many of my lawyer clients, they might be in their 30s or 40s before they start looking into this stuff. So go into your career with boundaries, with knowing how to look after your health. You know, no, it's not reasonable to work till 10 o'clock every night. You know, as a one-off on a completion, fine, but not every night. You know, and to work all the weekends and to, you know, not take lunch and not eat well and look after yourself and not sleep well and things like that, that you won't last, you know, you won't enjoy it doing it that way. So do it the right way from day one.
Yeah, definitely. I like the saying, a healthy lawyer is a good lawyer. So that's what I always say. And yeah, like a lot of your clients, I was 29 when I got diagnosed and had no idea I suffered with anxiety and depression before that point. And I wish I knew how to look after my well-being well before it got to that stage. I think my main advice would be to have that routine, like we were saying, the reading, the journaling, yoga, just a few items that work for you that you can maintain daily. If you do that every day, you'll look after your well-being, and that will be so important as you progress through your career.
Yeah. Do you know what it is, Sonay? It really comes down to one thing. The rest of it flows from that. And it is putting yourself first, which is very alien for lawyers, because as I said, we're perfectionists, we're people pleasers. But the minute you realize, actually, for me to do really well at this, I've got to put myself first. And that is what I've seen over the last 6 years as my business has grown, but I work less and less hours, and it's so easy now. You know, every single thing works better because I take care of myself now. Yeah, and that's the one decision that people need to make. They need to decide that they're going to put themselves first, and that's when you set boundaries, you do your meditation, you do your journaling, you do all those things that you've talked about, but that decision has to be there first. Yeah, I completely agree. Brilliant. So now we move on to our Q&A. I think we'll stop recording just to make sure everyone is comfortable to ask all the questions that they want.